Mr. Ed, we want to welcome you to the Apiary Chronicles podcast. We're excited you're here
I
today.
am too.
Wonderful. Let's let's get started with the Fast
Hit
Five.
me.
First question: What's your
My
name?
name is Jeff Harchoff, but I never go by that. I always go by Mr. Red, which is my YouTube channel.
Very good. What's your apiary's name?
I don't have an apiary name. I actually keep bees for a group of Benedictine monks in Covington, Louisiana. And so I am what I call their lone beekeeper.
Oh, very good. And you answered our next question. Where are you located?
Well, it is outside of Covington, but the monastery has its own zip code. So it's actually St. Benedict,
Oh,
Louisiana.
oh, interesting. What year did you start with bees?
I got my first bees in the spring of 1978.
Oh, wow. I'd like to say that's almost as old as I am, but not
That just
quite.
tells you how old I am.
How many colonies do you manage?
Right now, we're somewhere between 180 and 200.
Oh, wow. Very nice. Welcome to Apiary Chronicles, where we dive deep into the world of beekeeping and the people who make it all happen. I'm Cal Hardich, your host and fellow bee enthusiast. Well, Mr. Ed, why bees?
Well, it was bees are something that most people just fall into, and me too. I was drawn into bees just because of the natural curiosity. I I knew somebody who was a beekeeper. He showed me his bees, and I said, "I want to do that." That's all.
Oh,
It's very innocent, naive, and then the reality of it will come hit you later.
yeah, it's one of those chance meetings or just one little speck in your life, and then all of a sudden it takes over a bigger portion of
For
it.
sure, for sure.
So, how'd you get started?
Well, again, like I got started because somebody showed me some bees, and I really did like it. And that was in 1978. And what happened was I moved from the city, the big city of New Orleans, into the
Oh, yes.
country. And I decided, well, when I'm going to move to the country, well, that's a perfect spot to keep bees. So that's when I got bees when I came over to the North Shore from New Orleans, which is only about 50 miles away. And so like like most bees, I would have bees and then I would not have bees and then you'd have bees, and it's a very common cycle. And then eventually it's either gonna stick or it's not gonna stick. For me, it's stuck.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking as you moved to the country then you mentioned earlier, I think 1978. That was about the time I was standing in my dad's pickup watching him take care of bees that ignited my journey with bees. And that was before we had to deal with varroa
Yes,
mites
exactly.
and a lot of other things.
A
It
lot
was a
easier.
nicer time.
Yeah, a lot easier.
Yeah. Well, so when you got some hives, when you got some hives, did you jump whole hog in?
Oh,
You
no,
just do
no.
a couple
They
hogs,
are
couple
Yeah,
hives?
I started with 3, just and I always say 3 is a great number to begin with because
Oh,
because you're always gonna have loss. And so,
yes.
if you lose 2, well, at least you have 1, and that's generally how it works, and it worked that way for me too. So, I had 3, then I have 1, then I have 2, then I have 3, and then when I in '84, when I moved from the house that I was living in to the house that I built, I didn't bring my bees with me. I gave my bees to a brand new
Oh, yeah.
beekeeper, and then so I was beeless for probably a year or 2, and then I got more bees because you just it's in your blood. And but what's funny in those initial years from 1978 to probably 2006, I never really did anything with bees other than they were in the backyard. I didn't, and every once in a while I'd go and get honey from them. It's like, but remember, it was a lot easier to keep bees in those days.
Oh,
And
yes.
and so they were just out there, and if they swarmed, they swarmed. I didn't worry about anything. The bees were in the yard, and I got honey from them. So what a great job! So
Oh, yeah.
it was in Katrina, 2006, that I again, I was out of bees at that point,
Oh, yeah.
and so because we got hit really hard from Katrina here,
Mhm.
and again, then I went beeless for probably about another 2 years until I retired. No, no, that's not true. I still had beehives. I had beehives all the way up to 2009,
Oh, yeah.
and then in 2009, the last 3 colonies I had were stolen. So yes,
Oh.
they got some unscrupulous people out there in this world.
Oh,
So
yeah.
my last 3 hives were stolen, and so I was hiveless, and I had retired in 2009 from the post office, and when I retired, I started volunteering here at the Abbey, and
Oh,
my
yeah.
volunteering wasn't for bees; it was to build caskets because I've been a woodworker my entire life.
Oh,
My
yeah.
dad was a cabinet maker. He taught me the trade, and I learned the trade when I was 14 years old, and made my living at it till I was 22. So it was, and bees were a part of that. But when I volunteered at the Abbey, that's what I came here for, was to build caskets. And during that initial time, the first 3 years I was volunteering, one of the junior monks approached me and asked that he knew that I had bees, and he asked if I would help him um, to start up beekeeping because all monks have hobbies, and so this would have
Oh,
been
yeah.
just a hobby for the monks for that month. And so I said, "Sure," since I didn't have any bees, so I'll help you. So we got some bees, and then about 5 months later, that monk decided to leave, and so now we had the bees, and so that's how it all began.
Yes. When that junior monk came to you all,
Uh-huh.
came to you, did you all start with just a few hives
Right,
then, or
again,
you have
3
plans of going
3
bigger?
3
Oh,
hives, yeah.
the 3 then?
So
Yeah.
we do you want me to tell you the story of that?
I would love to hear the
Because
story.
it's actually one of the stories that I do in my conference when I talk at conferences because it really highlights beekeeping, the reality of beekeeping.
Oh, yeah.
And it for me, beekeeping isn't just messing around with bugs, it's more than that. That for me, keeping bees, you can relate life experience to that. And then the added aspect for me, it's a spiritual dimension as well. So when I took over that operation, I grew it from it was in 2012, yeah, is when I took it over.
Oh, yeah.
And then I grew it to March of 2016. We got up to about 35 hives. And there there never there never was any like goal for the bees. That at that point I was just keeping bees just to supply monks their
Oh, yeah.
honey. So what happened was in the spring, it was March 16th of 2016, we experienced here at the Abbey a flood. So that flood
Oh.
wiped away all of our beehives. All of them were gone. Yeah.
Oh, no.
But it was also at that time because we had grown to 35 hives. It, if you're familiar with expansion of an apiary, how it consumes a lot of space. The more hives you have, the more space that's required to keep your woodenware, your equipment, all that stuff. And though the Abbey is a very large campus, over 60 acres just for the campus, the monastery is 1,200 acres. But the I had all of our bee stuff in 5 different buildings because I couldn't house it in one building.
Oh, yeah.
So they had agreed to allow me to build a building, and so I built a honey house in 2016. It it was it was not completed. The frame was up, it was closed in, the stud walls were in, but there was no electrical or sheetrock or anything. And so in the spring, March of 2016, we had that flood, and we had 3 feet of water everywhere on the campus.
Oh.
every building had water in it, and the Abbey sustained like $35 million worth of damage
Oh,
from that
wow.
one flood. I mean, you got to remember the Abbey is a very large entity. It's like a little.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So at that point, when all of our hives were gone, I could have, and this is where, it's a life lesson, but it's also it's a crossroad that every beekeeper is going to come to. It's like the challenge of keeping bees. How do you overcome those challenges to sustain that initial desire that you had to begin keeping bees? So here I am. I'm at that crossroad that everything is gone. What do you do? And so I could have said, nah, I'm not, I'm finished with it. We didn't have any really plan or anything. And, you know, at that point in my life, I also was discerning the fact that I was going to become a monk. So
Oh,
so
yes.
that my life as a volunteer wasn't just volunteering to work at the Abbey, but is actually incorporating my life into the monastic life. And so with that added part of it, and I'm looking in the future of my life as a monk, I wanted to continue this bee thing. And so I said, well, no, let's really get into this thing and grow this thing. And at that point, I came up with the goal, the purpose of what we would be calling Abbey honey, and that is to be able to have enough beehives to supply honey, not to the monks, but to the gift shop, that we could sell honey in the gift shop
Oh, yes.
all year round. And so that was the plan that I came up with. I didn't know what that number was. So for that reason, I just went crazy and started just getting as many hives as I could. And I did that through learning how to do removals, cutouts,
Oh, yes.
swarms, manipulating hives, and doing splits. So I learned how to do that. And then from 2016 to now we're at 2024. So that's what, 8 years. We went from 0 to 200 is what we did.
And are you able to stock the gift shop with
Oh,
honey
all
year
year
round
round.
now?
Yes. So the number that I need to get is minimally is 400 gallons. So I figure 450 gallons is what I need to get every year to supply them. And we've been doing
Oh,
that
yeah.
for uh, three, 4 years now. 4 years now.
Yeah. Oh, very good. You'd mentioned early on in life your dad showed you about woodworking. Do you make all your woodenware or do you buy it?
When initially when I first started, I did make boxes, lids, covers, all that stuff. But it really is a lot cheaper to buy the boxes and the frames. I still build my bottom boards, my inner covers, my telescoping covers.
Oh, yeah.
I build those because I can build them cheaper than I can buy, and I think they're better quality. And so I still do. I build those. In fact, over the next, well, until February, I'll be building. I've got 150 hard bodies to put together. I'm going to build 50 bottom boards, 50 screen board, telescoping covers, and inner covers. So I'll be making videos on that as I go.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I I went through a phase when I was building all my equipment and I even built some frames just to go through the process. I built like, I don't know, 20 or 30 frames. It wasn't very many, but it was plenty for a lifetime because that was just the
Right.
process. But I just wanted to go through it.
Right. Yeah, you will learn that it's fun to build the stuff, but when you have all the other jobs that are required to do, it's not feasible, and it's more economical just to buy them and
Right.
spend your
Yeah.
time building it.
So for your hives, are you running 10 frame hives
They're all 10
typically?
frame double deep broods,
Okay.
and even for our honey supers, I use deep for my honey supers because
Oh, so keeping your workout going.
well, I cheat. I used to do the workout with just a two-man lift, but now
Oh yeah.
we have very nice equipment now.
Oh well, very good.
Yeah.
Very good. And have you always used deeps for your honey supers as
Always,
well?
ever since the beginning,
Yeah.
I've always used
Yeah.
deeps. I
What?
learned that lesson is that it's less equipment that I have to move around. They're interchangeable. If if I need to, what at 2 years ago I wasn't even using excluders, and so I would, and if I had queen got up into my honey box, I would just transfer brood to for honey frames. It worked very well for me. I use excluders now though.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And are you? I'm assuming they're not on pallets because
No,
you're not moving them.
no,
You just have them
right.
placed.
They're all
Yeah.
individual hives.
And with 200 hives, you have multiple locations with those, or
So
you have them
the
all
one of
there at the abbey?
the things that the flood taught me was you never keep all your eggs in one nest. So
Yeah.
so
Good point.
they're in 10 different yards. They're about a 30-mile radius from the abbey.
Oh.
And so
Oh yes.
people asked if we would keep our bees on their property. So the the number of hives per yard varies a lot, and it ranges from, I don't know, 60 to 4.
Oh
It's
yes.
just a
Yeah.
big group of them. So but that's just how I do it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. On your products you're selling through the gift shop, is it just honey, or do you have other
Right
products as
now,
well?
I do when I render the wax, I supply wax to the monk soap operation, where
Oh
they
yes.
will use that for balms, for hand lotion, and some candle production. So
Oh okay.
but
Yeah.
most of the wax that I get, I put right back into our bee operation for putting on the foundations.
Oh yes. So do you make your own foundation?
No, it's plastic foundation, uh,
Oh okay.
and
Okay.
I dip them into my wax. So then
Oh
I
okay,
coat my
so you get a nice
foundation with
coating on it.
wax, get the bees to draw it out.
Yeah. Do you like? uh, I'm I'm guessing when you started a few decades ago, you didn't use plastic
I
foundations.
did. I've always used plastic,
Oh, have you
right?
always
In
used it?
fact, when I first started
Yeah.
out, I was using complete plastic frames. They were
Oh,
all plastic
interesting.
frames, right? And
Yeah.
for whatever reason, back in those days, the bees didn't care. I never waxed them or anything. I just bought them, and I was buying everything
Oh,
from Man
yes,
Lake, and I just stuck them in. The bees drew it out. But
and it just worked.
it don't work like that no more. You better put wax on them, or they will not draw it out.
I have not used plastic frames for the most part. There's a handful I mess with, but not intentionally because I've always heard, not great stories about plastic
Mhm.
frames. So it's interesting. You started a long time ago with plastic frames and continued to use them,
And
or
I stopped
plastic
using them
foundation.
though,
Sorry.
because right after the flood is when I stopped using them because I was having issues. The ears on them would get brittle and break.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but what was really nice about it is the wax moth could never tear them up, like they
Oh
did with
yes.
with a wooden frame. That's a part I always did like, but I I had too much, trouble with breaking of the ears, and then it just I liked the plastic foundation in a wooden frame. I like that
Oh yeah.
configuration a lot better, and I think it's just a
Yeah.
personal preference.
Yeah, I think so. Once you get used to something, or if especially if you get started with plastic, you don't have this. Well, I've been doing this other way. Now, do I want to change? Do I change half of them? That's just the way you do it.
Now I've actually now cycled out every bit of my plastic frames. There's none of it in there. None of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It makes sense. Or it seems to me the plastic ones I've been exposed to does suffer from broken ears on them and things, which causes you a problem. So I could see the
Yeah,
benefit of
and
having
then
that plastic
also,
foundation.
if they get heated up, they can warp on you.
Oh yeah.
Um, that's not as big of an issue as the ears breaking off, but
Hmm.
they do warp.
Oh yeah. Very good. Um, Mr. Ed, let's go ahead and take a little bit of a transition. It's an interesting journey you have for your bees, but let's go beyond the buzz and talk about making splits.
Okay.
It's going to be coming up to that time of year pretty soon for you.
Right.
So let's just talk about how you get ready for making splits and what's your plan.
Well, believe it or not, here in Southeast Louisiana, because our winters are so mild, our bees fly almost 365 days a year.
Oh, yes.
We, I bet you we don't get, I don't know, 10, 15 days of temperatures below 20 degrees.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, it's like it's almost tropical here. And so consequently our bees fly almost all year round. I'm not saying that, when temperatures are, in the low 40s or 30s, they, completely ball up and they're not breaking the ball. But even when days are upper 30s, you'll see bees flying because it's
Oh,
just
yeah.
that's what they do. Also, because we're so far south and in that moderate temperature zone, our beginning trees that start blooming, we have the maple, the red maple, and our willow trees. They begin blooming mid-December, and so
Oh,
this is
yes.
this is the start really of the bees beginning to come out of winter and into spring, and and what a lot of particularly new beekeepers and old beekeepers, they fail to make the connection of this time frame. So here for us in middle December, end of December, the winter solstice, which is the shortest day of the year, December 22nd, right? And so after December 22nd, the number of hours of daylight increase while the number of hours of darkness decrease. So in this increase in daylight hours, then we have the beginning of the photosynthesis in plants and trees. And then,
Oh, yeah.
the spring is coming about. Well, bees are very, very, very good at reading nature. And so they keep pace with what nature's doing. Now, I'm not saying that they don't get thrown a curveball, and you get temperatures that drop and,
Oh,
you
yeah.
can have problems. But generally, it's it isn't based on temperature, it's based on daylight. And that's a fact that few people really take into consideration. It is daylight hours that matter. And so sometimes the bees can get caught with their pants down, the queen's laying good and you get hit with a cold snap for 2 or 3 days and might get knocked back a little. But for the most part, our queens laying, they begin laying by second week in January. She's laying pretty good
Oh,
at
yes.
that point. So, which is why I told you earlier, we can catch. I've caught swarms as early as February 3rd. So that's
Oh,
only
wow.
2 weeks after middle of
Oh, yeah.
January. So the hives will build up relatively quick. So what I'm doing in I wait till generally it's generally the second week in February. I will then start visiting my yards and checking for hive growth. I'm not worried about
Oh,
swarming. I'm looking for the bees, the number of bees in the hive to start growing because by this time, by the second week in February, I should have bees in both my deep supers. That I'm not saying we're gonna have a lot of them, but there's gonna be bees in both boxes for probably about 85% of all of our hives, you're going to have bees in 2 boxes. And this is why you have to constantly go out because not all genetics are the same. Not all the bees' genetics are the same. So some of them develop slower. It's not to say they won't catch up, but initially they're not going to develop as quickly. And all of our bees, all the avid bees are mutt bees, Hans 57.
Oh, yeah.
They're all from cutouts and splits and swarms. So now I don't have any kind of genetically altered, queen bees or anything. All of our bees are mutts. The one thing they have and that's really the one thing they have in common. They're all mutts. So I find that that idea of bees being able to um, be genetically okay or superior, that the bees that I keep in our yards have these qualities in them. Now,
Oh,
on
yeah.
top of that, I do not treat and I do not feed. I am the most hands-off beekeeper that's out there, and I attribute that to my extremely wide lazy streak. And plus, I'm retired and I got other things to do besides fool with bees. But that being said, I am very, very conscious of and aware of the fact that at certain times of year, you need to be doing certain things in order for your bees to do what they need to do if I want to get honey. And that's the goal of
Oh,
my
yeah.
operation is to create honey. I'm not looking to sell bees, even though I do sell bees because I only need to keep 150 hives. And so generally I'll sell off anything over that. And I don't sell bees off until after our honey season. After I got my crop, then I'll sell
Oh,
bees off.
yes.
And so we in mid-February, I'm going out and looking at my hives. I'm also at that point setting swarm traps. I set swarm traps. I know fantastic locations where, every year, if I wanted to spend the time catching swarms, I could catch 40, 50 swarms every year. I don't want to catch 40, 50 swarms. I've done
Oh,
it,
yeah.
but I don't want to do it anymore because it takes too much time to monitor these traps. But I do have one location that's only 3 miles away, and I set traps there every year. And minimally, I'm gonna get 7 to 10 swarms off of this one location. So that's enough for me. And all my other ones, I give those spots away to other beekeepers, but I'll keep that one as close. So I'm I'm monitoring my hives in February to see the growth of them, and then by really the second, third, and fourth week of February, I'm looking at the development in those hives. If I have the minimum number is 6 frames of bees in both my bottom box and my top box. If that criteria is met, then I can proceed forward to putting a double screen dividing board between them. And then whichever box does not have the queen in it, they'll make emergency cells. And then I can then make basically a walkaway split, but it's controlled because now I have queen cells in it. I also use swarm cells to make splits. So when I go into the hive and I've got swarm cells in it, I'll cut the swarm cells out and make the split right then and there and take the swarm cells and apply them into the box that doesn't have the queen
Oh,
and
yeah.
make my split right then and there. My whole focus of doing this so early in the year is because by March 15th, which is now I have 4 weeks really to do this splitting. By March 15th, I need to be finished my splits, and which some hives aren't even going to be big enough to split. So there's some of them that won't be, but I mark all these. But the ones that are split, the reason I need to split them is because our our first major nectar flow is going to be in May. So if I'm in March, so that's 8 weeks. So in 8 weeks, basically have 3 brood cycles. So in 3 brood
Oh, yeah.
cycles, now you're able to build up the number of bees in that box to then begin to create that surplus of honey. You're not going to get a surplus honey if you don't have the bees. To get the bees, you have to get them to build up as quickly as possible, which is why I do it as early as I do. And it's one of the aspects of producing honey that many, many, many beekeepers aren't aware of. The idea of it's all about timing and the window to make that surplus honey, not honey for them to survive through the year, but that
Right.
surplus honey for you to create a surplus of honey. you have to have an army of bees to create that surplus. And so that's what I do. That's my reasoning behind splits, early splits, getting the hives ready and growing our apiaries so that by beginning of May, I'm already got my third honey super. My honey super is on the box. By May 1st, I got my honey supers out.
Oh, yes.
And so I have all of May and all of June. So that's 8 weeks to collect surplus honey. And
And
go ahead.
you're able to collect surplus honey on those splits you made?
Yes, yeah. Generally,
Yeah.
generally the new queen, no, but on the old queen,
Oh, yeah.
yes, because the reason for that, I'm not saying that you don't get them off the new queen, but genetics plays a big role in this. In that, when I do my splits in say middle of February, well, just say by March, I'm finished my splits. So if I have an emergency cell or queen cell in that box, from the time that cell is laid to the time her first eggs hatch out, it's 40 days. 40
Oh,
days.
yeah.
That's 5 weeks. So 5 weeks is a big deal. That's your honey season, 5 weeks. So unless you get these new queens that are really with genetics that they can lay right from the get-go, they don't catch up with the old queens. The old queens are laying at 2,000 eggs every day.
Oh, yeah.
And so there by beginning of May, ooh, you got 20,000 bees in your box.
Do you ever take any of that brood to level some hives,
No,
or
that's
you mainly
beekeeping.
just letting that
That's
queen deal?
beekeeping. I don't do beekeeping. I'm interested in getting honey, and that's it. I
Oh,
don't
yes.
manipulate hives. I don't if a hive is struggling, that's their problem. It's not my
Oh,
problem.
yeah.
And I just soon have those genetics not in our field. So it's all right. I'm okay with bees not making it because I've always got more. And the genetics that wind up being in our apiaries, those are the genetics I want anyway.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure you've answered this question by your previous answer, because it's probably going to be too much beekeeping and not propagating the genetics you want. But you're not going into hives and replacing
No,
queens,
no,
then.
no.
Yeah.
If something should happen to that queen, the bees have got to fix the problem because I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not going to fix the problem. And so, again, it goes into mite control. Well, if the mites are there, well, the bees better be able to handle it or not. And then the same thing with beetles, the beetles are there. If they can't handle it, okay.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I'm not, I would not recommend my method of keeping bees to anybody. It works for me. I'm a big believer. If you need to treat your bees in order for them to survive, treat them. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not.
Right. And it's very interesting to me. So one thing beyond the splits, you talk about putting out swarm
Yes.
traps. So that's increasing. What kind of swarm traps are you using?
I generally use a 10 frame bee box because
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
it
Makes it simple.
yeah, because then that way I don't have to do anything. I just go get the box, bring it back, set it up. I'm done.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
a very
Yeah.
hands-off guy. I have lots and lots and lots of old equipment, old brood comb. So all this, I had the right things to attract swarms, and so I set it out,
Oh, yeah.
and I don't have any problems catching swarms because I also
Are
know where to set traps. I've been doing it.
are you setting those traps with a full box of
I
frames
sure
in
am.
them?
So
Yeah.
and so there, it's all drawn out old brood comb. I use they have to be. I found you really need to have a solid bottom on that box, and then I use an attractant. Mostly, I use lemongrass oil
Hmm.
to attract it. They have lots of swarm lures out there. Swarm commanders, swarm. There's a bunch of them out there.
There is. Yeah.
But lemongrass oil has always worked well for me, and I've got a bunch of videos showing me setting traps, I got plenty of videos showing the stuff I do. I got plenty of them.
But on those videos and just in real life, how high are you setting them off the ground?
I set them just about chest high because I don't want to work anything over my head. It's
Oh
this
yeah,
this
yeah.
is that's all I need to be. And because they're heavy, by the time I pull them out, those boxes could weigh 40 pounds.
Oh yeah,
And I don't
yeah.
want to be 40 pounds like this. I'd rather, I don't want it up here. I want it down here.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So one thing when I was prepping for the episode and thinking about making splits, I really was thinking, well, what size hives are you using for those splits? But it sounds like you're just everything is 10 frame deeps,
Right.
and you're doing a walkaway
Well,
split or maybe a little
it's a
bit
modified walkway because I use a double screen dividing board. And
using a double
right,
screen.
so
Yeah.
what all that is, it's just a 3/4 inch piece of plywood with screen. I use mosquito screen on both sides of it, and then on one end of it, there's an entrance. So that entrance is placed the opposite entrance of where the box on the bottom is. And you just take that screen, you put it between. I don't even look for the queen. I don't. I just all I do is I open up that box. If I've got 6 frames of bees, I'm gonna put that double screen dividing board in between the box and set the top box on it. 90% of the time, the queen is gonna be in the top box. So
Oh,
she's at that time of year, February, March, she's traveling between the top box and the bottom box lay-in. So you have to have eggs young enough in the box that doesn't have the queen for them to make
right.
emergency cells. And generally that's the case that you'll find the queen cells. Now sometimes you guess wrong and the queen was in the bottom, not in the top. Well, all I do is I just rotate the boxes again. I just because I want to put my queen up in the top because I want to move her off of that original hive stand. And
Oh,
the
okay.
reason I want to move her away is it's future swarm prevention. Every time I do anything with the queen, the box with the queen in it is to rob her of her worker bees. Because if I don't rob her from her worker bees, she's gonna grow so fast I can't keep up and she's gonna swarm. So I steal from her as often as I can. And so when I put that dividing board in there initially, whatever worker bees were in that top box with the queen, when they come out of that rear of the box, they're going to go around to the front of the box. They're going to go to the bottom
Yeah.
box. So you wind up with just hive bees in the top box initially. Well, pretty soon those hive bees have become worker bees. And by the 2 weeks time that the box with the queen on the top is sitting there, they become worker bees. And then when I go and actually make the split and I move that top box off, all those worker bees are going to come back to the top box. So I always throw another box when I do the split, move the queen off. I add another super to the bottom box, put a stick in it, and all the worker bees will
Huh.
come back to the back of the entrance. And then after 2 or 3 days, I'll take that stick out, and now they have to go up to the front.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I've never used a double screen board. I've seen them, but so 3/4 inch
So
plywood. You've got mesquite.
this is one of the only things I can say I really teach on keeping
Oh
bees.
yeah.
And I every year I make videos on the double screen divine board. In fact, when I went to Oklahoma, I spoke on the double screen divide. I talk about the double screen divine board because it is by far the simplest way to make a split that a
Oh yeah.
beginning beekeeper can do. As long as the criteria of enough bees in both boxes are there, you can put this board in there, and the chances are very good that you're going to have the bottom box that doesn't have the queen, they're going to develop emergency queen cells in that box. And then once you come back and find them, then you can move your old queen off and you've done your split. And now
Oh
you're
yeah.
moving forward. It's the simplest way. There's no going in your hive and looking for your queen, looking for brood, looking for pollen. Look, There's nothing wrong with doing that. If that's how you want to do it, that's fine. Me, I want to do it the fastest, easiest way.
Oh
I have
yeah.
been using a double screen dividing board since 2009, I think. And
Oh
it
yes.
it it has been the most successful way and easiest way of doing it. I know last year I did over 90 splits and I had 100% success in making
Oh yes.
it. It is
Yeah.
very, very, very efficient at making new queens.
So you put the board on, you wait 2 weeks,
No,
and then you
yeah.
move
So
the.
you put the board in, and then you have to go back within 7 to 10 days. You have to go back to see if they have emergency cells drawing out. And
Oh yeah.
if they have the emergency cells drawn out, at that point, you can then take the old queen and move her off because it's
Oh okay.
pointless to keep her
Yeah.
on there anymore. And you move her off and add another box, and then those bees, they're gonna have a new queen. And I always wanna have at least 3 emergency cells in that box because
Oh
not
yes.
all of them are gonna be successful. The first queen that comes out, she's gonna kill the other ones. Now, I
Yeah.
also and I said before, when I crack those 2 boxes to do my splits, if I have swarm cells in there already, I cut those swarm cells out, and I show in my videos how I do that, and and I'll cut them out, and I'll go in that same box below, and I'll go through there, and I'll scrape off a little bit of comb and put those swarm cells in there, and they look just like a superseding cell. It's
Oh
like
yes.
and then I make the split right then and there.
So oh
And
yeah.
it's
So
not
you go ahead and
again,
make
I'll
the
put
split.
at least 3 of them. They have to have 3 in each one.
Oh yeah.
If you have more than 3,
Oh
that's okay, but minimally,
yeah. But you gotta have that at least
yes,
three in
in
there.
my opinion,
Yeah.
yes.
Is the only time is spring or really very early spring? Is that the only time you make
Yes,
splits?
yeah. 'Cause
Yeah.
otherwise, they're getting ready to do the honey, and then after the honey, I'm not worried about it. They I've got I go and pull my honey supers generally at the end of June, and I harvest around 4th of July, and at that point, most of our boxes are back down to 2 boxes. Some of them have 3 because the comb wasn't drawn out or wasn't the honey wasn't capped, whatever reason. But for whatever boxes are out in the field by December, I'll go and pull those back, get them off of there, and harvest whatever honey that is. Because by December, beginning of December, I want all of our hives back to 2 boxes because I'm already
Oh
preparing
yeah.
for the next year. The
Oh yeah.
cycle is very, very predictable.
Oh yes. Yeah. Excellent conversation, Mr. Ed. But we are going to transition to our. I don't know why I say transition. I need to figure out a new word. I'm gonna have to buy a thesaurus.
And
We're gonna move to our famous 4
okay.
questions. And famous 4 questions
And so
are same
who came up
questions.
with these famous 4 questions?
Okay, so I used to listen. I don't used to. I listen to the Bigger Pockets podcast. So they had on one of their podcasts the famous 4 section. Famous 4, same 4 questions they ask. So when I started my other podcast, the Grazing Grass podcast, I was like, I love that ending with the same 4 questions or type of questions. So I came up with 3 questions for the grazing grass. I'm like, what's that 4th question? I finally figured it out. And so every episode of the grazing grass, we wrap up with the famous 4. So I took those questions and modified them for the Apiary Chronicles.
Well,
And it just, I really enjoy the answers to them. It introduces people to new
uh-huh.
resources. The one that was the last one was your tool, and we'll go over them in just a minute. But the tool, that was kind of a throwaway question for me. I just was convinced I needed 4. It's actually one of my favorite questions because you never know what people's going to answer. And the answers run the gamut. And it's very interesting. And then advice is always good. And then finding where people can find out more information. So I really like that. So we're continuing it on here.
Okay.
And I continue to call it the famous 4. It may not be famous outside this little studio right here, but it's famous. Mr. Ed, our first question is, what's your favorite beekeeping related book or resource?
Well, I would have to say my favorite because I've never read anything. I'm a hands-on kind of guy. I never my whole life has been one not of learning from a book. It's always been a hands-on operation. So the biggest resource that I can say that I've learned from is actually doing hive removals, going to people's houses
Oh, yes.
and removing hives. That has by far shown me more about bee behavior than any other thing. Now,
Oh,
and
yes.
I use what I have learned in the field in my understanding of how bees operate all the time. So this is for me, that is for sure the best tool that I have. Now, there's other great tools, which is, I say YouTube is a great tool because there's all of this information out there, readily out there. It's just you have to be very cautious on the filtering of what you watch because keeping bees in the north is not the same as keeping bees in the south. So
Oh, yeah.
it's very area or specific, and you need to be aware of that. However, I I I think that many ideas can be tweaked to fit the individual beekeepers. And so
Oh,
YouTube
yeah.
is a great resource as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Our second question, what's your favorite tool for the apiary?
So I've our honey house and the tools I use in the honey house have to be my favorite tools because
Oh,
everybody. Well, I would say that every beekeeper loves their hive tool, and you know how many
yeah.
you probably got about 15, 20 of these things, right? So it's like
Yeah, but they don't grow.
they disappear. I don't know where
They
they go,
do.
and so that's like I don't go anywhere without a hive tool and my bee suit. But as
Mm.
far as a specific tool, I I can't say I have a favorite because I have so many favorites.
Yeah.
Our honey processing equipment, we have a Dakota Gunnis chain uncapper where I can uncap two deep frames of honey in about 4 seconds in the top and
Oh,
bottom, and it's
wow.
beautiful. The whole processing is simplified. We can process about 2,000 pounds of honey in about 3 hours. So it's very quick. And so these
Mm.
tools that I've acquired over the years make that job so much easier and pleasant. But
Oh, yeah.
if I was to recommend one tool that every beekeeper should have, that would be I don't know if it's a hive lift, but it's using hydraulics. Something that you can grab
Oh,
your honey
okay.
super with. It's just like a dolly, but it's got forks on it, and it grabs your hive box, lifts it up, and then you can move it. You can move hives. It's just so much more convenient than using a two-man lift or gets two
Oh,
people
yes.
or trying to move a hive by yourself. Now, if I have to move a hive, I'm gonna grab my hive lift and move a hive. It is by far, and I just got one this year, and it has radically changed the way I harvest honey.
Oh, very good. Yeah. Our third question, what would you tell someone just getting started on their beekeeping journey?
You know, I if if there was that question, what would I think would be the best thing to recommend? And is that what the question is?
Yeah, what would you tell someone just getting started? What would you
You know, I always stand by the fact that, particularly for beginning beekeepers, that they should find a bee club in their area and join it. That local beekeepers, being associated with beekeepers in the area you live with, is going to help you out the most because there's always a possibility of becoming somebody mentoring you, finding a mentor, and then you actually or learning to keep bees in the exact area that you are in. And so there's all kinds of ways of tweaking. And so these beekeepers that have experience in these clubs, they are very much exposed to these ideas, and they're an invaluable resource for beginning beekeepers. So yes, find a bee club in your area and join it. And the the one the one other thing that I would say to beginning beekeepers is that you never forget the reason why you decide to become a beekeeper, and that the the, the first thing, that it may not be the very first thing, but associated with the very first thing, is that you do it because it's fun. And it's important, it's paramount that the idea of keeping bees be fun all the time. Because when it becomes not fun, you're not going to be a beekeeper. So
Oh, yeah.
whatever you need to do to sustain that initial desire of what you saw as a aspect of fun, that should be nurtured and developed.
Excellent advice there. I love the groups. I I go to one that's about an hour away, and I say I go. I haven't been in a year. I was telling my wife I got to get back going to it, and but in regen ag or regenerative ag, I wish we had the same thing, and we don't. I was talking to some fellow regenerative farmers in my area. I'm like, we need to meet once a month just to
Right?
talk. I really love that aspect of beekeeping and the groups all over the country.
Yeah, it's we in our area, we actually have 2 bee clubs, and I go to bed early every night, so I don't like staying up late, and so I try to make these meetings occasionally, but we have one in my neighborhood and one 30 miles away, and I go to both of them. But, all the beekeepers in them, you will find it's a very close family, especially if you go
Oh yeah.
to if you're very faithful to the bee club, you become it becomes like an extended family. It's
Oh
incredible,
yes.
and then the friendships that develop from it, as well as the knowledge that is gleaned from that friendship. It is probably the best advice that I can give. Join a bee club.
Very good. And lastly, Mr. Ed, where can others find out more about you?
Well, anytime you come visit St. Joseph Abbey, I'm here. But for those that aren't able to come make a visit at the Abbey, I have a YouTube channel, and that's all I have. I don't do Facebook. I don't do Instagram, Twitter. I don't do any of that. I'm very faithful to my YouTube channel, and I answer all my comments. So go to my YouTube channel, Jeff Harchoff Bees, and sign up, subscribe, hit the bell.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Very good. We'll put a link to
Oh,
it
great.
in our show notes. And Mr. Ed, we really appreciate you coming on and sharing
Oh, my
today.
pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for the invite. I'm looking forward to seeing what this thing looks like when you post it.
Wonderful.